My friends, it is now official, and this changes everything for the Philadelphia Eagles heading into 2026. According to E, Lane Johnson has confirmed that he is returning for his 14th NFL season. The future Hall of Fame right tackle will be back in midnight green, and for a team navigating major change along the coaching staff and offensive structure, this is the anchor they desperately needed. Lane Johnson told Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer that he is officially coming back, and that announcement alone stabilizes an offense that is about to look very different. Head coach Nick Sirianni will be adjusting the system under new offensive coordinator Sean Mannion in 2026. On top of that, the Eagles will have a new offensive line coach after Jeff Stoutland resigned earlier this month. That means a new scheme, a new play caller, and a new voice in the offensive line room. In the middle of all that transition, having number 65 locked in at right tackle is massive. Think about what this team looks like without him. Since being drafted 4th overall in 2013 out of Oklahoma by Chip Kelly, Lane Johnson has been the foundation of this offensive line. When he is on the field, the Eagles win just under 70% of their games. When he is off the field, that number drops to under 40%. That is not coincidence. That is impact. That is what a generational player does. Even at 35 years old, he has not shown real signs of decline. Yes, he missed the final 8 games last season, including the playoff loss to the San Francisco 49ers with a Lisfranc foot injury, but he has continued his rehab and is working to regain full strength. Before this announcement, there was speculation about retirement. Then off-season workout videos surfaced, showing him deadlifting serious weight and training at a high level. Offensive linemen who are retiring usually slim down. They do not train like they are preparing for another NFL season. Now we know why. He was preparing to come back. On the field, the numbers back up everything your eyes tell you. Over the last 2 seasons, he has allowed just 3 sacks total. In 2025, he did not allow a single sack or quarterback hit, ranking first among offensive tackles in both categories per PFF. He gave up only 7 pressures in 10 games. In 2024, he again did not allow a sack, gave up just 1 quarterback hit, and allowed only 10 pressures. That level of consistency at the most premium offensive line position outside of left tackle is rare. And remember, the 2025 offensive line as a whole struggled. Jordan Mailata regressed. Landon Dickerson dealt with injuries and is even considering retirement due to his long injury history. Cam Jurgens battled health issues and inconsistent play. Tyler Steen showed promise, but did not have steady support around him. The unit looked tired after a season in which Saquon Barkley rushed for over 2,000 yards and won Offensive Player of the Year, putting a heavy physical toll on the group. In that context, Lane Johnson still played at a high level. Now imagine trying to break in a new offensive coordinator like Sean Mannion, who has never called plays before, while also adjusting to a new offensive line coach and potentially reshuffling multiple positions up front without Lane Johnson. That would have created enormous question marks. With him, there is still work to do, but there is also stability. His accolades speak for themselves. 2-time Super Bowl champion, one of only 4 players in franchise history to win 2 titles. 2-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler. He has faced elite pass rushers in their primes and shut them down year after year. Von Miller, Nick Bosa, Khalil Mack, the list goes on. He has been the standard at right tackle. Beyond the statistics and the honors, he changes the psyche of the offense. When Jalen Hurts knows his front side is protected by Lane Johnson, it changes how he plays. It changes the confidence of the entire unit. That is leadership. That is presence. That is what a future Hall of Famer brings to the table. There is still a possibility that Howie Roseman looks to draft a developmental right tackle early in the upcoming draft to prepare for the future. It would not be surprising if the Eagles use one of their first 3 picks to secure a potential successor who could also play guard in the short term. But that is about planning ahead. Right now, the priority was making sure the present was secure, and now it is. Lane Johnson is coming back for 2026. In the middle of coaching turnover, scheme adjustments, and offensive line uncertainty, the Eagles just secured their cornerstone. So here's the big question for you. With Lane Johnson officially returning, do you believe this offensive line can bounce back to elite status in 2026? Or are there still too many concerns up front? The reason that question matters so much is because Lane Johnson returning does not automatically erase every concern, but it dramatically shifts the ceiling of this offense. When you have a player who has allowed just 3 sacks over the last 2 seasons combined, that is not simply good production. That is elite, era-defining consistency. In 2025, he did not allow a sack or a quarterback hit in 10 games. In 2024, he also did not allow a sack. That type of reliability on the edge is what allows an offense to function, especially when everything else around it is evolving. Now think about the timing of this decision. The Eagles are entering a season where Nick Sirianni will oversee an offensive adjustment under Sean Mannion, who has never called plays before and has only 2 years of prior coaching experience. On top of that, Jeff Stoutland, the only offensive line coach Lane Johnson has ever known since being drafted in 2013, has stepped away. Chris Cooper will now take over responsibilities as the scheme is expected to change. That is a lot of moving parts all at once. For a young coordinator installing new concepts and a new offensive line coach trying to establish authority, having a veteran like Lane Johnson in that room is invaluable. He is not just another starter, he is the standard. Cam Jurgens has called him an absolute freak. At 6'6" and over 300 pounds, with a sub 5-second 40 time coming out of Oklahoma, he redefined what the modern right tackle looks like. He moves like a tight end in space. He carries his weight differently than most linemen of past generations. That athleticism shows up every Sunday when he mirrors premier pass rushers and shuts them down. And do not forget the broader context of the offensive line's struggles last season. Jordan Mailata regressed, Landon Dickerson dealt with injuries, and is even considering retirement because of his long injury history. Cam Jurgens battled inconsistency and health concerns, even traveling to Medellin, Colombia for stem cell treatment in hopes of improving his back. Tyler Steen showed flashes, but did not have steady play on either side of him. Fred Johnson filled in, but he is not Lane Johnson. The unit as a whole did not run block at the dominant level we saw the year Saquon Barkley rushed for over 2,000 yards and won Offensive Player of the Year. When you zoom out, Lane Johnson was the stabilizer in a year where the line collectively underperformed. Even his down year by his standards still resulted in an 80.4 pass blocking grade in 2025, and top-tier rankings in pressure allowed. That tells you how high the bar is. It is also worth remembering what he has meant historically. Drafted 4th overall in 2013, he became one of the few truly great roster decisions from that era. 2 Super Bowl championships, 2 first-team All-Pro selections, 3 second-team All-Pro honors, 6 Pro Bowls, one of only 4 Eagles players in franchise history to win 2 titles. That resume is Canton-worthy. He has openly acknowledged that his past suspension could be discussed in Hall of Fame conversations, but since that time, he has performed at an even higher level, reinforcing his legacy year after year. For the front office, this decision buys time. Howie Roseman can still look toward the future and potentially draft a right tackle early to develop behind him. That player could even start at guard if needed while learning from one of the best to ever play the position. But the urgency is different now. Instead of scrambling to replace a legend, the Eagles can plan strategically while still competing at a high level in 2026. There is also a psychological effect here. When the locker room sees a 35-year-old future Hall of Famer grinding through rehab from a Lisfranc injury and committing to a 14th season, that sends a message. It says the window is still open. It says this team believes it can compete. Leadership is not just speeches, it is action. So as we look ahead to training camp, to the new offensive scheme, to the adjustments that will inevitably come with a first-time play caller, one thing is clear: the Eagles will not be rebuilding their identity up front. They will be retooling around a cornerstone who is still playing at an extraordinarily high level. Because here is where this gets even more interesting when you really think about the ripple effects of Lane Johnson's decision. When a franchise pillar like that commits to another season, it subtly changes how the entire offseason is approached. The front office is no longer operating from a place of urgency at right tackle. Instead, they can operate from a position of strength. They can evaluate prospects without desperation. They can develop depth instead of forcing a rookie into a role he is not ready for. That flexibility matters more than most people realize. And let's talk about the offensive identity for a moment. Over the last several years, the Eagles have leaned heavily into physicality. They have built their reputation on controlling the line of scrimmage, running the football effectively, and protecting the quarterback with elite tackle play. Even in a season where the offensive line as a whole did not perform at its peak, Lane Johnson remained the tone setter on the right side. His presence allows the coaching staff to design protections confidently. It allows tight ends and running backs to release release into routes rather than constantly chip or stay in to help. With a new offensive coordinator in Sean Mannion, who is stepping into his first play calling role, that kind of security blanket is critical. Installing a new system is challenging enough. Doing it while worrying about whether your right edge can hold up against premier pass rushers would make it nearly impossible. Now, Mannion can build knowing that one side of the pocket is anchored by a player who has consistently shut down elite competition. And we cannot ignore what this means for Jalen Hurts. Quarterbacks operate differently when they trust their protection. When Hurts knows that number 65 is handling business on the edge, it impacts his rhythm, his timing, and his willingness to step up into throws. That chemistry has been built over years. Continuity at that position is not just helpful, it is stabilizing. There's also the leadership component inside the locker room. Lane Johnson has seen every version of this team. Coaching changes, scheme changes, playoff runs, Super Bowl victories, injuries, suspensions, comebacks. Younger players coming into that room will now be guided by someone who understands exactly what it takes to sustain excellence over more than a decade. That type of institutional knowledge cannot be replaced by a draft pick or a free agent signing. At 35 years old, he is not simply hanging on. The production shows he is still among the best at his position. Over the last 2 seasons, allowing only 3 sacks combined is remarkable consistency. Not giving up a single sack in 2024 and 2025 individually speaks to preparation, technique, and discipline. Even when the rest of the line dealt with injuries and fatigue, he maintained his standard. Now, does that mean the offensive line does not need upgrades? Absolutely not. There are legitimate concerns. Jordan Mailata's regression needs to be addressed. Landon Dickerson's health is a major storyline. Cam Jurgens must return to a higher level of consistency. Depth must improve. But it is far easier to fix pieces around a rock than to replace the rock itself. From a long-term perspective, this likely signals that the organization understands the window is still open. When a player with 2 Super Bowl rings and multiple All-Pro honors commits to another year, it reflects belief. Belief that this roster can compete. Belief that the transition on the coaching staff can work. Belief that the offensive foundation is not broken, just in need of refinement. And here is something else to consider. If this truly is one of the final chapters of Lane Johnson's career, every snap now carries added significance. Every season becomes part of a closing legacy. He is building a resume that will be debated in Hall of Fame conversations for years to come. Every additional year of elite production strengthens that case. So as we project forward into 2026, the narrative is no longer uncertainty at right tackle. The narrative is stability amid change. It is experience guiding youth. It is a franchise legend choosing to make one more run. Now the spotlight shifts to the rest of the roster. Can the younger pieces rise to meet the standard he continues to set? Can the new coaching structure maximize the talent that